If you've ever felt like an actor in a meaningless play, if you've looked around and wondered why people submit themselves to such absurd social games, if every social interaction feels like a transaction where you sacrifice your essence so as not to make others uncomfortable, then this is the manifesto you've been waiting for. If you haven't felt it, maybe it's time to ask yourself if you've been living in a mirage, because today we're going to break the fourth wall. Stay, and I promise you'll never see social life the same way again. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, with his surgical pessimism, saw with terrifying clarity that most lives are an act. People dress, behave, and speak according to a pre-established script, not by their nature, but by an insatiable thirst for validation. But the question few dare to ask is, validation from whom? Think about it. How many times have you endured pointless conversations just to avoid seeming rude? How many times have you laughed at a joke that wasn't funny? How many times have you felt that every social encounter demands a toll on your own authenticity in exchange for a sense of belonging? Now the truly biting question, at what price? Schopenhauer sentenced it. Intelligence and social life are in conflict. The sharper you are, the more absurd the charade seems. Not out of arrogance, but because you see what the masses don't. You see the masks, the lies wrapped in courtesy, the fragility of a world where everyone begs for recognition in the eyes of others. And most disturbingly, you see that most people prefer to look away. Society is programmed to keep you in a state of distraction, not to invite you to reflection. Because when you start to think, the cracks become evident. You realize that most relationships are superficial, that most conversations are background noise, and that the effort to fit in is, in reality, a pact to be less than you are. And here the dilemma arises. If you are insightful enough to notice this, you are also sensitive enough to feel the loneliness that accompanies it. Because let's be honest, the more you think, the less you adapt. And people sense it. They feel that you don't join the collective hysteria, that you don't participate in social rituals with the same blind devotion. This unsettles them, because your mere presence is a reminder of the bubble they live in. Schopenhauer said it bluntly. Solitude is the fate of all excellent spirits. And this hurts. It hurts because the social narrative has sold you the idea that happiness is found in connection, in friends, in belonging. But what happens when most of those connections are empty? What happens when the price of socialization is mediocrity? What happens is that you start looking for something else. You withdraw. You begin to value your time above the approval of others. And this is where the change occurs. At first, loneliness feels like a sentence, but then it reveals itself as a gift, a sanctuary. In solitude, you discover something that society is determined to hide: peace of mind. Schopenhauer understood it like no one else. For him, intelligence was both a blessing and a burden. The more you understand the world, the less it seduces you. The more you understand human nature, the less you want to be a pawn in its game. And this is where many are mistaken, because they will interpret this message as a call to misanthropy, to hating people. But it's not like that. It's about discerning between interaction and obligation. It's about giving yourself permission to choose when and with whom to socialize, instead of blindly following the script. It's about accepting that true intelligence doesn't need external applause. But the most fascinating part is this. When you stop begging for acceptance, something in you transforms. People notice it. They see that you're not desperate to fit in, that your worth doesn't depend on their approval, that your world won't fall apart if you're not invited to the next gathering. And that unnerves them, because most people live trapped in the need to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. By not participating in that game, you become an enigma that intrigues, an enigma that intimidates. Because the irony is that the less you care about validation, the more power you have over it. True freedom begins when you free yourself from the judgment of others. So the next time someone tells you that you should be more sociable, that you should try to fit in, remember this: there's nothing wrong with you. You are simply someone who has seen the truth. And the truth, for most, is too uncomfortable. And this is where the plot gets even more complicated. When you assimilate that you don't need social approval, when you internalize that most interactions are an act, you start to notice something else: the silence. Silence becomes your ally, and that terrifies others because we live in a world programmed for noise. Social media, superficial conversations, news designed to provoke. Everything is made to keep you in perpetual distraction because silence forces you to think, and thinking is dangerous. Schopenhauer not only understood this, he lived it. He spent much of his life in solitude, immersed in philosophy, music, and introspection. Not because he hated people, but because he understood that the noise of the world only clutters the mind. This is where many get confused. They confuse solitude with isolation. But there's a crucial difference. Being alone is an act of power. It's a conscious choice to prefer depth to superficiality, quality to quantity. Being isolated, on the other hand, is a sentence, the frustrated longing of someone who wants to fit in but can't. And here's the irony. He who desperately seeks acceptance will always feel rejected. But he who rejects it by choice will never truly be alone. Because when you walk your own path, without worrying about others' approval, you attract those who are truly worthwhile. People who think, who question, who don't need to fill every second of their lives with noise. Because here's the truth. Intelligence isn't antisocial. It just despises the banal. Think of the great geniuses. They weren't hermits, but they also weren't willing to waste their time on empty talk. Da Vinci spent years immersed in his work, without feeling the need to share every idea. Nietzsche withdrew when he understood that his mind was a challenge to conventional minds. Tesla worked on his inventions with an obsession that few understood. And they were all labeled as eccentric. Why? Because they didn't bow to the norm. They didn't follow the script of social life. Because conventional social life is nothing more than a series of routines designed to keep you within the system. From birth, you are programmed to believe that being accepted is the most important thing. They tell you that you need friends, that you need a group, that isolation is a bad thing. But no one tells you that most of those groups exist only because of the fear of loneliness, not because of a real affinity. No one tells you that many people with large social circles feel empty. No one tells you that the best ideas were born in minds that dared to step away from the noise. But there's something else. This is where many get confused. They believe that the solution is to reject society completely, to become hermits. But it's not like that. True power doesn't reside in fleeing, but in knowing when to interact and when not to. True power is to move discreetly when the noise is excessive, but to appear with force when necessary. Think of the great strategists. They weren't always at the center of the battle, but when they appeared, their impact was monumental. Those who truly understand life are neither slaves to society nor fugitives from it. They are silent players. They move their pieces without boasting. They build in the dark. And when the world finally notices them, it's already too late, because they have won without needing to call attention to themselves. Schopenhauer stated that superior intelligence is destined for solitude, not as a punishment, but as an advantage, because in solitude is where you can truly build something worthwhile. But what happens to those who don't understand it? To those who believe that happiness only exists in the approval of others? They live trapped in a cycle of dependency. Every photo they upload, every story they share, every opinion they express, everything is calculated to receive a reaction, a like, a comment, a validation that confirms they exist. But the truth is brutal. If your existence depends on the reaction of others, you have never truly existed. You are just a reflection of what others expect of you. And that is the opposite of being free. Freedom is not doing what you want without consequences. It is not needing anyone's approval to do what you truly desire. It is not depending on noise to feel alive. It is being able to be in silence without anxiety, without the need to fill every void with distractions. If you can't do that, you're not free. You are a prisoner of noise. Schopenhauer understood it. That's why he distanced himself, not as an act of rejection, but as a strategy, because only from a distance can reality be seen clearly, and only in silence can one hear one's own voice. If you've made it this far, it's because deep down, you already knew it. You knew that something about social life doesn't fit. You knew that many interactions are pure formality. You knew that growth doesn't happen in the noise, but in introspection. Now the question is, will you have the courage to accept it? Because once you do, there's no turning back. The noise becomes unbearable. Trivial conversations seem absurd. The need to fit in disappears. And all that's left is the truth, that solitude is not a punishment. It's a privilege reserved for those who are strong enough to embrace it. You can no longer pretend that empty conversations fill you, that external validation means something. That's the point of no return. It's terrifying, isn't it? Because most people spend their lives trying to fit in, sacrificing their essence to be accepted, shutting off parts of themselves so as not to make others uncomfortable. But you can no longer do that, because now you understand what most will never understand. Life is not about fitting in. It's about finding yourself and having the courage to follow that path, even if it means walking alone. And here is the most brutal paradox. The more you dare to be yourself, the more attractive you become. Because people crave authenticity, but very few have the courage to live it. And those who do, who move without fear, who don't need anyone's approval, are the ones who end up being followed. Not because they seek it, but because true freedom is so rare, so magnetic, that it's impossible to ignore. And now I ask you, what are you going to do with this truth? You can ignore it. You can go back to your normal life, continue to participate in the charade, continue to adapt to the mold. Or you can do something much more difficult. You can accept the discomfort of the truth. You can embrace the idea that you will never be understood by the majority. You can stop betraying yourself just to fit in. You can start living for yourself, not for others. Because in the end, there are two types of people in this world: those who adapt and those who find themselves. Most choose the former because it's easier, more comfortable. But the few who choose the latter are the ones who truly leave a mark. So tell me, what kind of person are you? If you made it this far, I want you to leave a comment with the phrase, "Silence is power." Because those who understand this are ready to play the game of life by their own rules. If this video made you think, if you felt that it was describing something you've always felt but could never express, then subscribe. Because this is just the beginning. See you in the next video.